Mr. Godongwane, firstly, before we talk about the details of the report, talk about its status at the moment. What is the status of this report?
The status of this report at the moment is a research report which has been done on behalf of the African National Congress. At the moment, as you are, our National General Council resolved that we should do some research and do study visit. That is the status at the moment. We will then take those areas in the report that require policy debate into our structures.
What happens next then? Are you going to take it out to your structures for people to debate?
For people to debate in our policy conference and in the national conference in December. Of course, in Petroswa, this report has serious ramifications for the economy and the public at large. Therefore, we would welcome contribution and debate with the relevant stakeholders, including the mining industry.
Sure. The reason why I'm asking is whether or not there's still a possibility that by the time this report goes to the ANC's policy conference in June, and by the time it goes to Mangaung for the elective conference, some of the issues would have changed. Some of the issues would be back on this particular report.
Look, the report as it stands, we will take into account any contribution that comes in between the policy conference in June and raise whatever has been submitted in that policy conference. And I would imagine the policy conference then would take those submissions into account and make the appropriate recommendations to the national conference.
All right, let me be specific about the question that I'm asking. It's been widely reported that nationalisation is dismissed in this report. But if you send it back to the branches, is it possible that the branches can then again force nationalisation back into this report so that by the time then it goes to the policy conference, it again considers nationalisation? I
would be insulting our branches if I say they can't do that. It's their democratic right to say, look, irrespective of what you have said, we are of the view that nationalization is the best option in the circumstances. But obviously, the report advises against that for a variety of reasons. The report cautions against that direction.
All right, let's get some reaction here. James Lorimer of the DA, he is the Shadow Minister of Mineral Resources. Mr. Lorimer, you've heard what then Mr. Godongwane has had to say about the report. Your reaction, please.
Yes, I have. I think the first thing that we should realize is that this government's stewardship of the mining industry has a very poor record, in that mining, which should be one of the major drivers of our economy, has shrunk under control of this government. You heard about the reduction in the size of its contribution to GDP. In 1993, South African mining industry's contribution to the economy was 103 billion rand. In 2009, it was down to 93 billion. This was despite massive growth in mining worldwide. There was a global commodity boom and what some people call a super cycle. Yet since 2000, our mining industry has shrunk by 1% a year. And this government's interaction with the mining industry has been characterized by wide-scale intervention. Now we're starting to talk about the possibility of even greater intervention. I don't see how this is going to help at all. I think what we're hearing from Mr. Godongwane is that the ANC is confused about what it wants to do. It's clearly divided. There's some people like Trevor Manuel who say that nationalisation is off the table, and yet Gwede Mantashe is saying, well, no, it's not. And we're also hearing that, well, if the branches decide that it should go ahead, it'll go ahead. And the other point that I want to make here is that by its very discussion, this talk of nationalisation is driving away investment.
But that's an important point.
Investors,
Mr. Lorimer,
they want to put their money where it's
safe.
But, they're not going to put it somewhere where they're going to risk losing it.
Sure. Let's pick up on that point, because I think Mr. Mantashe was arguing that point yesterday. He was saying that, look, why is it that in countries such as Botswana, for instance, there are these deals between government and Botswana, and yet the investments continue? He's making reference to other countries and saying that in other countries these discussions are allowed, but in our country, once we say, hey, let's discuss the modalities, let's discuss cooperation, and people say, wait, the investments are going to go away.
If I can just address Botswana, a lot of people have a lot of favorable things to say about Botswana, and yes, it's done reasonably well. But the deal that has been done in Botswana, a 50% profit-sharing agreement between De Beers and the Botswana government, has arguably come at the expense of diversification. That economy is very focused on just one aspect, and that is the mining and that deal. And if you look at the type of economic growth that there's been, it hasn't been terribly equitable. The wealthy have certainly grown even more wealthy, or the elite have grown wealthy, but the majority of Botswana have not.
Is that true, though? But wait, because
here?
As far as I understand, 70% of their GDP comes from the mines. And this year, in fact, last week or so, they were talking about a budget surplus in that country when we are talking about a deficit. So the contribution of the mining sector in the government's finances is massive in Botswana.
It's huge, but I mean, you have to then ask, well, if they'd done it in a different way, could it not have been even better?
Yes, but the issue is they are talking about different ways. They are willing to talk openly about partnerships. And the argument that Mr. Mandasha is putting forward is, in this country, why then are we not even allowed to talk about certain partnerships? Because immediately you raise issues of, let's say, 50-50, and people say, well, the investors are going to go away. Why is the discussion not transparent and open?
Well, it is transparent and open. I'm just
But you just said yourself.
If you want to do this, you've got to realize that there's a cost.
But you just said so yourself, Mr. Lorimer.
If the ruling party starts talking seriously about nationalizing mines, you are going to drive away investment. It's as simple as that.
Well, once you said it yourself, that once you raise the topic in this country, the investors are going to run away. But they don't do so in other parts of the world.
But there's lots of things that we don't even put on the table to discuss in this country because they're just such non-starters. Why are we even discussing this? It does not have a good record around the world. You pointed to Botswana. Well, yeah, in some ways perhaps it's good, but it's also not brought equality to people in that economy.
A couple of SMSs already have come through here. Somebody says, for instance, ANC-led majority of African in terms of property rights, now still denied majority rights to minerals. That's Peter. Another one says, this sick economic plan of the ANC has no basis. It is a mere imperialist program. How can a civil rights organization speak of nationalism? It's absurd. Silema in Rustenburg says, what will happen to Bafokeng? Because they are black and they have already, or they already own the mines. That's Gladwin Simela. Let's go to Sam in Durban. Sam, good morning to you. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, Baba. Good morning with your guest as well. I want to say Mr. Lorimer is confusing issues. As soon as he hears some success stories in Botswana, he wants to talk about other things which are irrelevant. The issue here is, the mining industry and its contribution to the economy. Then he brings in, the other social issues that are not part of the discussion because he cannot rebut the argument that it can work in South Africa as well. The problem is that they themselves, when I say themselves, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to say the white folks who run the economy. They are the first to say to the outside world, hey, get out of there, we're not sure of the future of this country. And I believe that it can work. And
how do you
talk
know
about
that?
cost, there will always be economic cost. If you do one thing, there's always going to be an economic cost of what could you have done with your money. So you mustn't confuse issues.
Sure.
Let them open their minds to the discussion and see where it can take us.
All right. Well, Mr. Lorimer will respond to you, Msomi in Durban. Thank you very much. Let's hear from Rose, though, also in Durban. Hello, Rose.
Hello, Tony.
Hi, go ahead.
I get absolutely furious that whenever a discussion is raised that could or might benefit the poorer and disenfranchised people of the country, there is always a kickback, in particular from this gentleman. I think he's from the DA, I'm not sure. I just came in now. About how there's going to be disinvestment, people don't want to invest, Well, you know what? That is what the Republicans say in America all the time. It's like listening to a Republican guy whose sole interest is in the rich and in getting the rich to be richer and all of the rhetoric around that. The fact of the matter is that the economies of the world can no longer sustain a situation where 95% of the people are living on 5% of the world's resources and the world's economic output. It's absolutely preposterous, and it has to change, and we need every discussion we can get our hands on to change that. Okay. And if this is one of them, let's discuss it. If people are lily-livered and they want to go running, let them go running.
All right. I can tell you that Mr. Enoch Godongwane is here now in the studio with me. I'm going to ask Mr. Godongwane to respond to the calls.
Yeah, thank you, Peter, again. Let me start by saying the report is not necessarily saying no nationalization. What the report says is that already, through the relevant legislation, we've already transferred the mineral wealth beneath the soil to public ownership. That's the starting point. It then says, instead of us managing mines, what we need to do is to extract more rents via the resource rent tax. The current legislation, it took over the mineral rights.
Yeah.
The minerals belong to the state.
Yeah.
And then have been leased back to industry. What we need to be doing now, those that are managing the mining and the mines at the moment, what we need to do is to extract rent. Carefully, though, in such a manner that we don't force them to close down.
Taxes and rent.
Yeah. But let me just clarify something Mr. Lorimer has made. He's trying to say the mining industry has been shrinking. That's absolutely not correct. What is looking at the mining industry in isolation of other sectors? Because other sectors, there have been other sectors in the economy which have grown faster, and therefore, as a proportion, the mining industry has decreased. For instance, the financial sector, the financial service, the techno. During the period in question, they've grown substantially. So it's not necessarily that the mining industry has not been growing. Other than gold, all other sectors have grown.
The IDC report that came out at the Indaba yesterday is talking about infrastructure and how that is putting a stranglehold on growth in as far as the industry is concerned. And I've spoken to the industry here on the show.
Yeah, no, on the infrastructure, there's substance in that argument at two levels. I mean, both the rail and electricity have been a constraint to growth, and we still are. As we speak, for instance, the capacity in Richards Bay Mineral is about 90 million tons. We hardly make 70 million tons in terms of railing the stuff to Richards Bay. So that's a constraint.
And I think the industry, though, Mr. Godongwane, has itself admitted, for instance, you speak about gold. We used to be, number 1, 2 in terms of the production. Now we're at number 4.
Yeah.
So where the world has moved forward in terms of the output, we have stood firm.
No, look, there are a whole range of structural problems with the gold industry. Reserves are declining, mining is deeper, and a whole range of things. The cost of extraction are very prohibitive. So gold as an industry, I suspect, is one of those areas where even the players in the industry give us a 30-year period from now. So gold is but other minerals are quite impressive, as we have the platinum group, the iron ore, your chrome and others.
But are you suggesting that none of this has had anything to do with policy? I mean, there was a point when policy was a problem and the industry was saying clarify policies, positions in South Africa so that we can come and make investments. Why are we not getting people investing in this sector?
I would imagine the period which was affected by policy, when there was still some doubt about the empowerment in the industry. And I think during that period, yes, we can talk about policy. But other than that, there's no policy issues.
Mr. Lorimer?
I have to disagree with you there. I think, Mr. Godongwane, if you want to find out whether policy uncertainty is an issue, take a trip down to the mining Indaba today and talk to people involved in the industry. Because there is huge uncertainty, and that is putting off investment, and in fact threatens the viability of some of our mines.
But what are they uncertain about?
I was there yesterday and addressed one of the sessions. So I'm not saying everything is perfect. There's no doubt that the fact that we have not clarified the nationalisation debate correctly, it still gives people some anxiety. The regulatory issues, the licensing arrangements, which are taking longer. Those are some of the issues. The report addresses some of those issues quite effectively, interesting enough.
But if there was that kind of certainty, why are we not able then to attract the necessary investment into this sector?
Look, part of what I'm saying, some of the problems we're facing, as I've indicated, infrastructure for me is quite a critical area. And the report proposes how quite innovative ways of dealing with the infrastructure problems to ensure that, for instance, the levels at which we're pushing manganese is constrained at about how much, 6 million. We can double that capacity if we improve on infrastructure. The demand is there.
All right, Mr. Lorimer, your responses, please.
I think the net effect of almost all the things that we've been told about what are contained in this document is going to be bad for the mining industry. And I think you can't run away from the fact that this government has intervened in mining and mining has shrunk. That means less money for government. That means fewer jobs. We can do something different, though. We can turn that around. We can encourage investment in our mining. The mining industry at the moment employs directly 500,000 people. Now, can you imagine if we could double the size of that industry? We could maybe get 1 million people in jobs, and think of all the extra tax revenues that would bring. But that's not going to happen if government increases its intervention in the industry.